Content Hub ONE serves developers with an SDK and a command line interface. With the CLI, you can manage your content types, content and media items from your Content Hub ONE instance. The command line interface can be handy to automate interactions with your Content Hub ONE tenant, or serialize content types and content into your source code repository, or push your serialized items into your Content Hub ONE instance. The CLI can be installed in several ways to multiple operation systems such as Windows, Mac OS or Linux. You will find all ways documented at the Sitecore documentation for Content Hub ONE. I will install the CLI using the .NET Tools description. Make sure you have the .NET 6 SDK installed. To install the CLI, you can run the .NET Tool install command, installing it globally or locally. As a source, you pass the Content Hub ONE CLI path. You can verify your installation using the CH ONE CLI command. The CLI offers functionality around the tenant, delivery and serialization. You can always get help on the commands with -h or --help. And you can get a verbose output using the -v or --verbose. You can also get the version of your CLI that has been installed using --version. Using the tenant command, you can add a tenant to your list of connections. You can list the added tenants using the list command. Only one tenant is marked as active and will be used for interactions using the CLI. You can change the active status to another listed tenant using the select command. For sure, you can also remove tenants from the list or refresh credentials in case something has changed. If you need to run a single command against another tenant that is not the active one at the moment, you can override the tenant on command level as well. So, to add a tenant, you need to pass the following parameters: the organization ID, the tenant ID, the client ID, and the client secret. Those you can find in the Content Hub ONE UI. Just click the icon in the upper right corner and then on your organization name. In here you find all the information on your organization and your tenant. To get the client ID and the client secret, you can go to the Settings and Auth Client. In here you can copy the client ID and the client secret. Beside those parameters, you can also specify the base path, authority and audience, which is only useful if you need to connect to another Content Hub ONE environment such as staging or dev. So this is mostly useful for internal Sitecore developers. Let me make a connection to my Content Hub ONE tenant. If I get the list of tenants, I can see that my Content Hub ONE instance is there as well. You can connect to as many Content Hub ONE tenants as you like. The list shows the active status. As mentioned earlier, only one connection to a tenant can be active. You can see the tenant name, the tenant ID, the organization ID, and the base path, which is more interesting for the Sitecore internal developers dealing with different Content Hub ONE environments such as staging or dev. You can also change the way the list is returned. For example, you can get it as JSON using the output parameter. This way you can use the output and pipe it into another process. By default, your Content Hub ONE credentials are stored in the Operation System Credential Manager, which is Keychain on the Mac OS or Credential Manager on Windows machines. Setting the environment variable sc ch ONE CLI credentials fallback to true, the credentials are stored in the file system using the path userprofile.sitecore ch ONE CLI. With the delivery command we have keys, content and media available. The content and media command allows to publish and unpublish content or media items from your Content Hub ONE tenant to Experience Edge. To publish or unpublish a content item or media item, you need to specify the item identifier. The process runs in background and can take a couple of seconds until the published item is available on the Edge delivery layer. The key command allows to interact with the API keys. You can list them, add new API keys, revoke or rename them. When adding a new key, you have to specify the name and type similar to the process in the Content Hub ONE UI. The type can be either preview or delivery, depending on what API you want to access. Serialization allows having a representation of your content items and content types as YAML files. This way, you can store content items and content types in your source code repository and also ship them across Content Hub ONE tenants. To get the items from your Content Hub ONE tenant, you need to pull them. If you want to install them from your file system to your Content Hub ONE tenant, you need to push them. When we pull the content types from the connected tenant, we can optionally specify an identifier of the content type. By default, all available content types will be serialized with its field definitions. When not using the folder parameter to specify an alternative working directory, the content types are serialized into the current directory. A folder called Content Types will be created automatically, along with some other folders for Visual Studio Code setting the YAML schema with some IntelliSense. When pulling the content items, specifying the content type is mandatory. All items of this particular content type will be serialized. You can optionally set the identifier parameter to only pull one content item. When not using the folder parameter to specify an alternative working directory, the content items are serialized into the current directory. A folder called Content Items will be created automatically. The YAML files will be sorted into a folder named after the content type. Now, let me perform a change on one of the content types and add a field. I'll copy one of the existing fields and change the identifier and the name to video. Now, let me run the diff command. I can see that all content types are equal, but the content type for homepage has been updated. If I run the diff command with a verbose parameter, I can also see that the field with the ID video has been added. Let's push the changes to my Content Hub ONE instance. The validation command is run implicitly along with the push. As I have not specified the identifier of the content type I wanted to push, all content types are pushed. Let's check the result in the Content Hub ONE UI. I can see that the video field of type short text has been added as a non-required field. As we've seen during the push, a validation was performed. We can also run the validation on content types and content items separately. The validation checks if all parameters are specified in the YAML file and if the values do not exceed the amount of characters specified for each field type. This way we can ensure that the YAML files are correctly specified before hitting the Content Hub ONE API. We can also create a package from the YAML files of the working directory using the package create command. This package can be easily installed to a Content Hub ONE instance using the package install command. When creating a package, you have to specify the name of the package using the name parameter. When installing a package, you have to specify the path to the package. During installation of the package, the order of dependencies is taken into account. Content types are installed before content items, and content items that have references to other content items are installed after the ones they depend on. So, with the command line interface for Content Hub ONE, we can connect to multiple Content Hub ONE instances, publish and unpublish content, we can serialize content and content types to the source code repository and create packages that can be installed to Content Hub ONE.